You fall to your knees, exhausted. This battle with the Gorgons has gone on longer than you thought. You look for another tree or root or plant to infuse your magic into. Yet nothing comes up. Things seem dire. But, best of all, your friends come to your side. The two people you trust most in this world stand with you. Hope returns as you all prepare for one last battle. A new legend is born. Hi there, I'm Scott D. Forsyth, professional voice actor and pop culture enthusiast. Today we're talking about the sleeper hit of 2021, a little video game that all storytellers and story enjoyers should give a shot. Wildermyth. I'll be going over why Wildermyth is such a unique experience and why I think it's best of all. But first, let's take a quick break and then get right back to the show. So Wildermyth is an indie game by World Walker Games, a relatively new studio who released its game in 2019 in early access. Early access, for people who don't know, that's just kind of releasing the game in a state that's playable but not representing the final release. It's kind of like viewing book chapters before the full book comes out. So it wasn't until 2021 that the game released fully in its 1.0 release. And what I kind of like to say is like it got out of beta and more gaming outlets started covering it. That's when I found out about the game. I heard it through the podcast The Besties. It was recommended, I believe, by Chris Plant, who said, and this is a quote, but a paraphrase quote, said that the game was like playing D&D with the world's best GM. And I'm a huge fan of tabletop role-playing games and Dungeons & Dragons. So I had to give it a shot. Oh, and I heard that, I was like, yeah, I'm sold. Wildermyth is a tactical role-playing game where you command a band of adventurers as they go on quests to save the world. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. It sounds very generic when I do that. But the notable thing about Wildermyth is that everything is procedurally generated. And for what that means for people who don't particularly follow like gaming trends, it means that all the events, the characters, the story beats are being randomly made as you play in a particular, like let's say round, like a game. So every time you play the game, it's going to be different. So you get to customize your heroes, what they look like, who they are, what type of items they use, what class they have, what abilities they like to use. And then you can customize the relationships to the other characters you control. So typically when you start a campaign, you have about 3 characters and you can choose that one of them, like the one couple is a with childhood friends. And so they're best friends forever and ever. Or maybe as, you know, the company kind of grows and you get more characters, 2 characters become close just because they like being around each other or they love their share of fighting. But, you know, friendship is not the only option. There's also rivals. And so it could be, you know, just 2 characters who want to outdo each other, kind of like a Legolas and Gimli sort of way, like in Lord of the Rings. Or it could just be that they truly have a disdain for each other. I remember I had one character who ended up having a kid. I'll get into that in just a moment. And the other party member who was their friend did not like their kid and were rivals with them. It was really interesting. And so, like I mentioned, that the characters can fall in love with people in the party and outside of the party, and then they can have children. So they can either adopt or they can have biological children. So, and then those characters, those children can be included into the party because as you go on these quests, time passes. So if you start the game with, you know, a great warrior who then by, you know, the final chapter of the game may be too old to continue adventuring, or maybe is still adventuring, but is the wise mentor to the new group. And it's neat because these elements aren't even really in your control to an extent. World Walker Games has a really fun way of balancing like what is happening that's unique to your character and what's happening because you're kind of setting stuff up. Like, if I have two characters and they end up like falling in love, I would hope that they would get married and have kids. But the game might not give you that as an option. But it's like, if you want it, you can kind of nudge people in that direction. And how the game does that is you set up characters having parameters, and then the game builds upon that, which is exactly how a game master works in a tabletop role-playing game. In a game like Dungeons and Dragons, where you have people who are playing the game, and then you have someone who's kind of like the referee in explaining the story. I hope we are far enough in pop culture to where when I explain a dungeon master and GM, there is an episode of Community or an episode of Ghosts or something that can hopefully give people that thought of like, I kind of know what a game master is. So it really, really feels like, I mean, this is a fully single player game, or it can be. There is a multiplayer aspect to it, but it's a little bit different. But it feels like you are playing with somebody else. It feels like someone real is in control of this game and is helping you make the best decisions and best story moments that work for you. Let me give a general example of how this mechanic works, because it's very unique and I've not seen any game do anything like this. So let's say you have a character who has like what's called a greedy personality trait. When you're creating your character, kind of like in The Sims, you can give them personality traits and they give them on a score. So someone may be kind, but also may have a little bit of like a greedy tendency. So let's say this greedy character gets an event where they're out in the world and they see a precious gem sitting on a pedestal. There's nobody around, it's just them. And so you get the option that, like, let's say they want to grab it and take it for them or just leave it alone. So yeah, maybe like, so the options are given to you and then the outcome is determined. So maybe the greed overwhelms them and they grab the gem, and then you see that it starts like grafting onto their skin. So then forever, whether it's their face, their eye, or their arm, like that character now just has like a gem encrusted body part. And you won't know until you pick this decision. Maybe instead the character loves to steal, but then realizes, like, I know some things are worth it. This is not one of them. And then they can leave. So like you still have that element, even if like the character didn't go through with the decision. The game is littered with moments like this throughout the entire story. And it's my favorite part of Wildermyth. And it's so unique and it's so interesting. And on the topic of this, you get these little random events as you're going on the stories, and sometimes you will have events kind of repeat. Like I used the gem example because every person I know who has played this game has had the gem story come across one of their characters. I've had it come across about 3 of mine, but that doesn't deter me. Like that doesn't bother me. I can see where it can bother some people, but it's neat to see how different characters would react. Because I'm always creating new characters. I mean, that's the nature of the game. You very rarely stick with the same characters over a long period of time. There's a mechanic for that for people who want to do that, and I'll get into that later. But it's also important to say that this development team, World Walker Games, is like 6 people. So the fact that they're doing all of these really intricate and very unique story elements with just a small group of people, like, yeah, you're gonna come into stuff that you've kind of seen before, but that's super excusable because it's like they're working with the best they can. Like this is the neatest element of the game. And so how I've been explaining it, you might be thinking that like everything's procedurally generated. Like characters are always going on these random adventures, which is an option. You can definitely do that. And it's a very fun option to do that. And you can do that in a multiplayer aspect where people who own the game, you can control either like let's say me and a friend of the show, Tristan, is playing. Well, it's like he can control 2 characters, I can control 2 characters, and we go in the same campaign together. So that's how the multiplayer works. But there is full-fledged written campaigns that highlight each of the different enemies in the game, and all the enemies in the game are very, very unique. Like you don't get elves, dwarves, and orcs and very classic fantasy stuff. You get a lot of new and very different and intricate creatures and enemies to fight that are very fleshed out. There's one campaign where like you end up working with a small faction of the enemy group. And so you're seeing that like these aren't just mindless evil enemies. There are good guys and there are bad guys, just like the humans. You're going to have like a lot to do in this really seemingly modest game. I say seemingly modest because I will say the art looks a bit simple. They're going for a very storybook aspect. So I'm not talking about like fully 3D models or detailed pixel sprites. And I know that's been a deterrent for some of the people that they haven't particularly liked the art style. I like it. And the more you play the game, the more it really grows on you. And like I mentioned before, that it is such a small team. I would rather have these intricate stories, this like really complex way of how the game works, rather than mind-blowing graphics. That's not important to me when the main aspect of the game is so good. But for people who like a little bit more, fighting and combat and action, those random story events have all of that. They're great. But like any good RPG, you will be fighting other enemies, and that's when Wildermyth kind of becomes a little tactics game. And so to explain tactics for people who don't know, you'll be moving your characters on like a grid system and like battling stuff. So kind of like a board game, kind of like the game XCOM for maybe people who have heard of that. And if you played XCOM, you'll really know how this combat works because they were very inspired by that series, which is probably a series I will be talking about on Best of All, because XCOM is amazing. But yeah, so kind of board game like. You have these little pieces, you're moving them to fight the enemy pieces, and it's super fun. It's really engaging, and it's really simple for people who just want to progress the story, and complex for people who want to build like intricate characters who are like really good at something. And the magic system in this game is so cool. Any magic user infuses their magic into something in the environment, so like a tree or a rock, and then you get different spells off of that. Like if you infuse with a vine, you can like ensnare one of the enemies and pull it towards the vine. If you infuse it with a tree, you can like blow up the tree and have like the bark splinter off and like jam into the enemies. It kind of feels like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they are using the environment to manipulate the magic to attack their enemies. Again, it's very unique, and it's a really, really interesting setting. And for those who want a different experience, who are maybe less experienced in combat and stuff, again, this game has difficulty options that can be set at the start of a campaign. I don't think you can change it once a campaign's is going on. But you can tailor the experience to what you want to have. So if you do one campaign and the combat felt a little bit too easy for you, then bump up the difficulty. And the next adventure, see how it goes. And maybe it was too tough and you failed. Then just do another campaign, bring in a new cast of characters, and tackle the enemy like once again. The game will kind of reflect that. And what's neat and very exciting for people who are like maybe too scared of like, I don't want one of my characters to die. If your character loses all of their health, death is not always an option. There are some options where it's like they just have to retreat and they'll be fine, or there will be options where like they can either die and fight, do the final blow on the enemy, and so like destroy the boss, but like sacrificing their life instead. Or there'll be times where it's like, oh, they've been gravely wounded. And so then when you see them again, they have like a scar across their face. And so then it's like, okay, maybe they're a little less accurate. But guess what? They're still alive. So again, like any good storyteller, death isn't a final, like, easy way out to end a character. Because characters can continue. I'm so proud of that segue. I just led into one of the most, like, remarkable aspects of Wildermyth, and that's how characters progress. So, you completed one of the campaigns. Your characters have been battered and bruised. Maybe you lost somebody along the way. But that gem warrior, that greedy gem warrior you really, really liked, in Wildermyth, that character and other characters can be added into a pool of like heroes called legacy characters. And then during different campaigns, those legacy characters can appear or even join your new group. So this not only gives another layer to the game to work with, because then like you can have like old heroes interacting with new heroes. You can have like, you know, they're talking about this mentor, and then when you see them, you're like, oh, let me get the greedy gem warrior. Oh, it's him. Like, he's back. Like, that's so exciting. You have like these big moments that we see that's so prevalent in media right now that you can make within the game. And then like, it's so fun to have these cast of heroes that you really like. And that you can work and use in different campaigns. And then there's some times where it's like, I had a character one time, it was a story moment, but like fully sacrificed their life. And then at the end of the campaign, it's like, oh, we'll add her to the legacy pool. And I was like, no, I don't want to, because it's like, I wanted that character's ending moment to be that like final sacrifice. I didn't want to cheat myself on that. But like the game said, like, well, if you wanted to, it could have been like they come back and everyone's like, oh, I thought you were dead. Like you can have all of this. It's so neat. And then, like I said before, when I was talking about the different campaigns, like you can just do a random, very easy campaign and just, you know, bring back all your old heroes to have like another fun adventure together. Wildermyth is unlike any RPG I've played. And I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around what World Walker Games accomplished. I mean, this seems impossible. On paper, if I was a developer, I was like, good luck. But they did it. Making a single player game feel like you're playing Dungeons and Dragons with an entire group of your friends. And as someone who rarely gets to play in role-playing games and is always like crafting the story and is the man behind the screen, the man of the hour, this game touched a very, very particular heartstring. And I love it. So where can you play Wildermyth? The best way to do it is through Steam. And so that is available for sure on PC, and it looks like on Macs and Linux can run it as well. Don't hold me to that, but reading the Steam page, it looks like that's how that works. And then apparently a Nintendo Switch version is coming soon. I don't know how soon, but when it does, oh my goodness, I will be fully buying that and playing it on the Switch. Because this game's going to be so much fun on the Switch and taking on the go. Oh man, I'm thrilled. So there's the what's what on Wildermyth. That's a tongue twister. So if you have any other thoughts on Wildermyth, if you've played it before, or if you have any thoughts on any of the different topics I've covered so far on Best of All, or you want to see me cover, feel free to email us at mail@ScottyMeLad.com. That email address again is mail@ScottyMeLad.com. Scotty MELAD.com. And I'll develop a segment of the show to read your letters and such. I'm very excited. So please email me. And hopefully you've taken something out of this episode and will give the game a shot. But best of all, you were a listener. And we at ScottyMeLad thank you. And that's my closer. Have a good one. Best of All was hosted and produced by Scott D. Forsyth, using the song Mia by Rolando Pujadas from the album Canta as our intro and outro theme.